I met you at Greenbelt, and then there was an event that we did in Leeds, which was it Leeds or Sheffield?
It was Leeds.
Yeah, that I've been scratching my head at all day to try to remember the name of, but I can't remember the name of it. But it was to do with the Beatitudes. Is that right? Am I remembering that right?
Yeah, it was. That's actually another connection to Steve, who we were talking to earlier. This was a friend of mine who actually did the artwork for this book. Who's Cy Smith, who's a Leeds-based artist, who pulled together an exhibition of artists, secular artists, artists from anywhere and everywhere, responding to the use of the Beatitudes in Donald Trump's inauguration speech. So, as you can imagine, it was quite an amazing, but quite angry at times, quite certainly a very hard-hitting exhibition. And Steve submitted some photographs to that, which I found absolutely captivating. So that's why he got a mention earlier. But yeah, it was Leeds.
Yeah. So that was an extraordinary experience, and kind of getting to meet you in person there and to see such a diversity of work, like to hear poets, but also to see all of the work that was being exhibited was extraordinary.
Yeah.
And I think I found all of that very inspirational, and very inspirational is a bit of a trite word sometimes, isn't it? But it changed something in me. It kind of I suppose it sort of woke me up, where like I've always been quite creative. I think creativity is part of our humanity anyway. But for me, like, that had always found expression in writing and in art. But I'd kind of, it had sort of become quieter in my life, and I didn't really know how to return to it. And then enter Chris, and and I found a way to kind of return to writing in a way that connected with like deeper parts of myself, and how I view the world, and how I wanted to think about the world and faith and all of that kind of stuff as well. So like, actually that meeting with you, Chris, it was really like, it's your fault, everything that's happened since.
That's an honour to be talked of in that regard, but I'm sure it would have come out anyway. I'm glad I pulled a plug, but it was all there. So tell me about you.
The exhibition. Oh, sorry. The exhibition was called World Upside Down, Vicky. So maybe that's appropriate.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just you obviously done lots of writing since then. I can see some of this. It flicks through social media, which has become a really important carrier for lots of poetry now, which is really interesting. It's not necessarily finding its home within sort of mainstream publishing anymore, but it's constantly there or thereabouts. And I don't think that's just because my feed is skewed towards poetry. Maybe it is. But so what's your practice at the moment? How much are you writing? What sort of a discipline do you bring to that, or no discipline? How does that work?
And it goes in kind of fits and starts. Weirdly enough, the busier I am, the more that seems to be the time that I want to like write something or create something, which is a bit annoying sometimes because that's not always possible. But I do try to write something most weeks. So there's things like, I see Margaret is here, Margaret Royal. There's a thing on Twitter called Top Tweet Tuesday, and both Margaret and myself are kind of, I think probably Margaret more than me, are fairly regular contributors to that. And I love that it's like writing these small poems around a particular discipline, like writing an imagist poem, and you sort of participate in this online community, and like, I'm usually floored by the quality of work that's produced, and I usually write something new for that if I'm participating in a particular week, just because it's like a good kind of kickstart, and it's also accessible, like it's not to be longer than 20 lines, and yeah, so that is part of the discipline. I've got like I'm not a very fast worker, so I've got a long-term project of working on a poetry collection, so I'm meandering my way through that. I'm more of a meanderer than a disciplined writer, Chris.
I don't think poetry can be rushed. I think that's fair enough. All right, well, thank you. Let's bring Chris in then, because Chris is someone that's I think you were also invited to that same exhibition and couldn't make it, as a matter of
That's right. Yeah.
but this book here, which is an absolute gem. This came about because Chris had been posting these very sparse, spare kind of poems that would fit on a post-it note. That was the brief, that it would had to fit on a post-it note.
Yeah.
And I was just amazed at how much you were able to put into these, because I use far too many words, as probably you're about to find out. Whereas the style that you, I mean, of course, I'm sure that's not the only sort of poetry you write, but it seems to be a style that you've made your own. So,
it's funny you should say that, because it's become quite hard to not write like that since I did it. I do force myself, and I have got several poems that I may come out tonight that are not that short. But yeah, it began because I felt like I was writing something that worked, and then I thought, oh, but there's an extra bit I could add here, and I would end up stretching the idea so thin that it just felt like I was wasting everyone's time as well as my own. And I wanted to make myself concentrate on the germ of an idea and make that work. So yeah, I had two rules for that project. One was I could only use a standard post-it note, and two was I wasn't allowed to write any smaller than I would normally to make it all fit. So it has influenced what I do as a regular practice now, and it just means I write haiku quite a lot. Because they're I mean, people who can write good haiku that convey an awful lot of stuff in just 17 syllables are remarkable to me. It's such a hard thing. One of my favorite poems is In a Bath Tea Shop by John Betjeman, because it's only 5 or 6 lines, and in my head it's an entire scene. It's you can see what they're drinking and eating, you can see what their faces must look like, all the emotions they're going through, and he does it in so few words that it's remarkable. So I've never reached that height, I don't think, but it's something I aspire to.
Wow. And we met equally through poetry, didn't we?
We did.
Was that also through one of those poetry anthologies? I think it probably
was. It was, yeah. Yeah, I had several poems in the first poetry anthology you worked on, and then I edited one of the chapters in the second.
Yeah.
And in between those two things, I'd started the post-it note project, which sort of just mushroomed and never seemed to stop for a while. So I think I'm on something like 140 of them now. So
wow,
they're still going quietly in the background. I don't post them as often as I think some people want me to, but yeah, they're still going. Okay,
wow. Right, well, we should turn towards poetry then. We've preambled enough. What I would say, folks, if some of you may be used to listening to poetry, if you are, deep respect, because I don't think I am really. But it's, in my way of seeing it, I think the first thing you have to do is relax. So a glass of wine, or in my case, a glass of whiskey, can be very helpful, because you don't worry too much about meaning. You let the words find you. I think when listening to poetry, when you're reading poetry, it's a bit different, isn't it? You've got the density of the page, but the rest of the time, just let the words go by, and some of them will just stick. And you watch for those. You watch for the ones that resonate with your heart. That's the best way I can describe listening to poetry. We have a little trick for how we're going to do this, which I think will work. We've chosen a load of random themes. And then my challenge to my fellow poets was to choose a poem which somehow resonated with the theme. And I'm hoping that some of them are going to have to work really hard to actually make them resonate with that theme. But yeah, that's absolutely fine, so long as they can defend it. So Emily is going to randomly pick the theme, and then we'll take it in turns to go first. So yeah, let's do the thing. Emily, over to you.
Okay. Yep. So your first theme
The world is beautiful. And Dad, would you like to go first? Since that'll be a nice challenge for you.
Yes, we were saying earlier that I only write miserable poems, so the world is beautiful, then it can't just be miserable. But yeah, I'm happy to start that one. I try not to write only miserable poems, but yeah, there's been a lot of miserable poems over the last kind of 4 years after the exhibition we were talking about earlier. So, but this one is called The Coming of Winter, which we're just on the cusp of now, it feels. And I don't know about you, but I don't do well through winter. It's hard. You know, the loss of light, the kind of darkness and dampness up here, where we're up on the west of Scotland. So I think it's already been raining for about 2 weeks non-stop. So that feeling can sometimes just kind of lie on me a little while. So I wrote this poem as much of anything to kind of try and grapple with that sort of dampness. It's called The Coming of Winter. It is not the loss of light. It is the revealing of a candle's flame. It is not the loss of leaves. It is the finest tracery fingering a steel grey sky. It is not the vice of ice, but the delicious itch of scarf and air stratified by wood smoke. It is not incessant soaking rain, but the musical blessing to be found behind window panes. It is not cruelty. It is jubilee when rested lands, like human hands, fall fallow. It is not cold. It is a well-stoked fire, drawing both of us closer. So there you go. There's my not miserable poem about winter.
Well done. So your next theme?
Oh no, we need the next person.
Oh, yeah. I mean the next theme for you three, unless there was anybody wanting to.
No, we've all chosen one to that theme, so let the others do this.
Oh,
Yeah.
I see.
I didn't explain that very well, did I?
No. Okay, well that's good. Thank you.
So we now need either Vicky or Chris.
Just making sure that he's paid attention to his own instructions. Okay, Vicky, would you like?
My turn next. This is a poem that I think I wrote maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And it was about our son, Caleb. When I told him I was reading this poem tonight, he went, "Oh no, really?" But he loved it when I wrote it. So he's not here listening. So therefore, I'm just going to tell you all about it. We live in quite a rural location, and there's not really many places that the children could go when they were younger. It's just countryside, and there's a hill just up behind our house, like a track that goes up there. And so at the time, Caleb would have been probably about 8, and he was just sort of like going out to play by himself a little bit more. There's not any children around here, so he had to do it by himself. And he took himself off up the lane, and there's these trees that form like a little line. There's not very many of them now. They keep getting blown by the wind because they're really old. So gradually they're all coming down. But he would just go up there and just play imaginary games for ages. And sometimes I would go and stand in our front garden and just kind of like peer over the wall, and I could see this little figure playing up there. And I found it really moving. And so I ended up writing a poem to try to figure out what it was that was moving me. So it's called Playing Out. Blue and violet clouds push and tease the sinking sun. Leaves rattle and scatter in autumn's cooling. After tea in the purpling dusk, our boy runs up the field behind home, wielding a stick for a sword amidst watchful trees. Spaceships and castles are birthed between grasses and gorse, and the creep of the coming night is a delicious thrill to him. Out of the window I watch him run, hair whipped flicked by wind, his hoodie a grudging concession to cold. I watch him make worlds round the swaying trees and hope wonder visits him in the dusky light. That the moon rises early this evening, that a bat flickers by, scattering surprise, that the old trunks of the old trees creak and groan in the wind, sharing secrets with him. I hope he returns with the dark, feeling brave, wild, strong, with a breathless tumble of tails as he runs back into the arms of home.
Lovely. And Chris, other Chris. Oh, hi Nicola.
Hello, hi Emily. Just wanted to say a little thing that,
Yeah, of course.
Vicky, as you read your poem, and then I'll mute again. You talked about your son and read the poem, which is a beautiful poem, and it made me remember well over 10 years ago or 12 years ago, a long time ago, and I did some writing things with Birkbeck in London, and I had to write a short story, but in the end what I wrote was like the first chapter of a novel, which has never gone on, but that first chapter is there. And I wrote it up against the deadline, so I went into my son's room and sat at his desk, and he was a young teenager, not there, obviously, while I was doing this. And I used him and his being as one of my characters because it made it easier to get on and write. You know, so the Arctic Monkeys was in there somewhere because he was listening to them, and the fact that I knew he would come in from school and eat a bowl of cornflakes. You know, all these things that helped me put something together. And every now and then, since then, I've stumbled across this piece of writing and read it through, and I see my son Jacob there. I've got him, you know, and he's of that age, and I've got him in the words there, and now he's 30, you see. So it's personally, it's a lovely thing, and I wondered if you feel like that with your poem and your son. That's all.
I do. I feel like I captured a moment in time. He's like, you know, now he's spending his evening upstairs on his PlayStation talking to his friends. It's quite different to the boy playing playing with dragons and fighting with swords up by the trees and using his imagination. He's still the same boy, but he's, you know, in a different stage now. It's lovely to kind of have that little kind of treasure chest of memories, isn't it?
And Claire and Sam, did you mean to put the hand up there on the screen? No, okay, good. Just checking. It was hands, okay. Great. So Chris.
I'm tempted to read one of the post-it poems in my book as a response to that, because it's exactly the same thing. But I won't, because it feels like I'm cheating myself slightly. So I'm going to read something I wrote just after lockdown. So it still feels quite a new thing to me. Just before lockdown, I'd been unemployed for a while, and I'd spent some of the time between looking for work, trying to learn to identify birds in the environment around me by their song first, and then see if I could spot them physically. And during lockdown, I couldn't go as far, and I found it very frustrating. But there was one, I knew there was a wren somewhere because I could hear it. And this is a poem I wrote after finally being able to spot the thing in an evergreen tree at the back of our house. It's called Early Bird. We heard it long before I saw it. The sharp, almost pointed call cutting through the fog of sound. Then came the frustration of trying to pinpoint the song and trace along the branches, sifting out the robins and sparrows, seeing between the pigeons and avoiding the crows, jackdaws. And it was by accident that we met. A morning walk and a determination to look up rather than always down. And there, in the evergreens that hem the gardens beyond, an inky silhouette brushed delicately onto the sky, a wren.
Lovely. Fab. Oh, that was nice. Very cheery. A lovely start. So, yes. Have you got your hand up, Mum? Just unmute you. There you go.
Yeah, just to say that was beautiful. All three poems beautiful, but there's something so special about actually spotting a wren, isn't there? And you really captured it.
It's really loud. I could hear it was probably 200 meters away, and I could hear it every morning. It was so irritating. I knew it was there. It feels like a real achievement when you see a wren.
Yeah.
So I think we're ready for the next theme. Yeah. Okay. So this is quite a change. Your next theme is angry. And Vicky, do you want to go first? If you're ready.
I'm just rustling through my pages to find they're not very angry poems. I've got to justify it. Okay, give me a sec. I think I chose this poem because it was really a kind of, I suppose it's a bit like the previous one. I wrote it as a personal reflection on something that had happened. There was someone that I was friends with, and we'd had this disagreement, and there was this kind of conflict between us. And so I'm kind of like bending the definition of anger towards conflict. And I suppose I was just like sat in that place where I had feelings that I didn't really quite know how to deal with them in a helpful and healthy way. And I kept on hoping that it would just go away and that would wake up one day and it would all be fine. And that wasn't really happening. And that was quite distressing. And so this poem was really written about I suppose it was the way that it resolved in the end. I think actually this also took place during lockdown. It's unsurprising, really, isn't it, that there's like lockdown poems emerging now. And so there was that sort of sense too of, just the way that things get blown up out of all proportion in kind of heightened circumstances. And so I think the poem is almost like a day that was going wrong, and then I chose to make it go right, or try to anyway. Yeah, it's called September. Some days the world turns on this, whether I slept in this, that was this morning actually, whether I slept in this morning or mislaid my daughter's school jumper, or remembered to whisper tenderly to the houseplants, to water the seedlings, or to call my dad, whether I greeted the spiders under the stairs with a smile, or neglected the moldy fruit in the fruit bowl, an unnoticed little disgrace. And some days the world turns, despite me not knowing the precise scientific process by which this daily miracle occurs. Despite the truth, I will gladly forsake duty for play. I abandon lists and formula for dreaming and wondering. The world turns without my express permission. And even when I sleep, she goes on without me. Even when I wake, she's already on her way. But today, this day, the world turns like the low September sky, rolling heavy with threatened malice. She cleaves cleanly in two, day and night equal in the equinox. Autumn arrives, ushering in her dark stories, like unwelcome guests come too early, too many. And I am cleaved also, despite myself. I do not want the world to turn this way, not today. I stand in the field and howl at the sky, feel shorn wheat stalks scratch my ankles, a mild rebuke for my excess of care. The world is turning and I want to resist. This is not a turn I want to take. None of us want to take. How can we resist? So behind closed doors, we agree that this world, she shall turn on this. Kindness, hope, love, joy, gentleness, the sweetest list of good fruit. And she shall turn on whether I remember to water the seedlings, to feed the birds, to call my dad, to help my neighbor, to talk to the spiders, to play and laugh and sometimes cry. The equinox will come again, and despite it all, the world will turn and turn and turn. And as she turns, I turn too. Bit of a tangent, really, but
Lovely. That's grand. If there's nobody wanting to speak just now, then Chris, have you got an angry poem loaded up?
That's me, I assume. Sorry.
Two Chris's is slightly easier for me because one's dad.
That's true. I'm not sure I'm going to bend the theme, but I am going to take a risk and do a poem that is about other people's anger. For about, my goodness, it's probably 12 years now, I've been doing a podcast about Doctor Who. And we choose to take a joyful kind of perspective on anything that happens. So when we talk about something we've seen, we will choose to discuss the bits we enjoyed and criticize anything we didn't through comedy sketches, silly songs, really silly things. And in 2017, they announced that the next Doctor would be a woman, and the internet went mad. And I was asked by another podcast who knew I write poems to write a response. So I spent a foolish 48 hours in the comment section of various newspaper articles trying to work out what people thought about it, or more specifically, what white middle-aged men thought about this. And I pulled together a found poem from everything. So everything I'm about to perform is, none of it's my words. They're all words of angry people on the internet. I did write a sequel with all positive comments, but this is the one that still kind of resonates with me. It still feels like one of the worst times I've ever been involved in something, and one of the kind of more satisfying conclusions, because they went ahead despite all of that, and it's inspired an awful lot of people. So this is where I feel like an imposter, because I'm not going to be serious particularly now. This is a poem called Nobody Wants a TARDIS Full of Bras. No, 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 no. PC nonsense. The beginning of the end. Everybody I've spoken to who are fans say this is it for them. Why is everything about gender equality? Some things are just better for one gender. We made a huge mistake allowing women to vote. You should stop destroying TV shows because of your agenda. Doctor Who is male. It's not sexism, it's fact. Time travel is a man thing. You can't have a bit of skirt playing Doctor Who. The Doctor must always be male, assisted by a young, energetic, attractive female. Females should be in a secondary role, looking nice, able to clean and tidy up the TARDIS and say things to compliment the Doctor. A real woman would have turned down the role and asked for a man to take her place. I stopped watching this when everything suddenly had to have a gay twist to it. I'm waiting for the first gender confused Dalek. That'll keep the social justice warriors happy. Rubbish, rubbish, rubbish. Yes, the Doctor's always been a man, but I'm willing to give it a chance, a season to see what happens. Could be good. Maybe she's the best person for the role. At least it's not another Scott. People are being overdramatic about this. This goes against all the teachings of the Bible. Fire and brimstone will come forth to destroy the BBC. Next step, making being male illegal. This is the BBC's revenge for Brexit. What next? Female Ghostbusters? How long will it be until they turn Father Christmas into a woman? Yet still no man's hour on Radio 4. Nobody wants a TARDIS full of bras. It's called Doctor Who, not Staff Nurse Who, for God's sake. We don't want the TARDIS turning into a lady's wardrobe. Where will she keep all her shoes? I expect she will fill up the TARDIS with cushions, unused exercise equipment from QVC, and foot spas.
Wow, that's shocking. That must have been a really dark 48 hours for you trawling those comments.
Yeah, it wasn't pleasant. I then wrote a response using positive comments, which was called Time Lesbians in Space, but I'm not going to read that tonight.
Is that in your book? I'll need to find it later.
It's not in the book, no.
Oh. Okay, so yeah, I know Vicky you've seen, but Dad and Chris, there's lots of nice comments in the chat. I won't read them all out to you because at least Dad might squirm, but have a look. And Dad and Angry Pole.
Sorry, I'm getting lost as to whether I'm unmuting myself or whether Emily's unmuting me. I love both of those for so many different reasons. I'm loving just the idea of all these words, this scattergun of awfulness that you've just transformed, Chris. That's just brilliant. And Vicky, the spiders under the stairs, that's going to stay with me for some time. Speaking to the spiders under the stairs, that's a delicious sentence. And all those, yeah, I could lose myself in that for a while. What are the spiders under the stairs, and what are we saying to them, and what are they saying back? I think I said that my my start into this current kind of poetry writing kind of journey that I've been on was this World Upside Down exhibition, which was triggered by Cy Smith pulling together all the art around the Beatitudes and Trump's use of the Beatitudes and the craziness of those two things sitting alongside one another. So I spent probably quite a long time writing poems of resistance, and I was going to read you one of those until about 2 minutes ago, because there's one here called Angry, which is essentially riffing on this idea of Jesus turning over the tables in the temple and thinking about, well, what would be on them now? What would be the sort of things that we would want to kind of get angry about? And I had this thing in my head that anger is not the opposite of love, that we can be angry because of love, because of kind of dissatisfaction with what we're seeing, particularly around justice issues. But also we can't stay there because it can make us sick. And I certainly found in my journey through writing all these protest poems that it started to kind of chip at my soul. You know, I think that the whole spiral downwards of the constant immersion in bad news stories that we've all kind of been around, and to a certain extent are still in. And I was determined to break free from that. And actually I found that the pandemic, in some weird kind of sense, became a pivot point into something else, which is what, you know, the direction that my writing took. But I'm actually going to read you a poem called Welfare State, which is angry, but in a way that I hope is a positive and a loving anger. And I wrote this quite a long time ago when I earned a living as a social worker, faced with seeing people in absolute poverty in our society. So this is called welfare state, as I said. The sofa split some years ago. The gas fire hisses as if through broken teeth. And Colin tries to stir up hope on the baby belling, whilst the TV screen sucks the kids in like flecks of dust. A manufactured crisis for some pop star wannabe stabs out from the fat old tube. The crowd screams. No wonder. And Colin stares into the tangled noodles, wondering what might become of the children, for not one of them can sing. But their faces, lit by cathode light, are beautiful. So in case the reference in there isn't obvious, because it isn't sometimes when you first read a poem, it's me, all the kind of pop star, become famous, escape from your circumstances through singing on TV kind of program seemed like the only possible escape that anybody would have from that situation of poverty. So it was me angrily, but trying to kind of see the humanity in that and the beauty in that. Over to you, Anne.
All beautiful in very different ways. So would you like to do another theme, or maybe have a chat for a few minutes before the break? What would you rather?
Let's do another theme. We'll find some time for some more chat later.
All right. So our next theme from the high-tech theme generator is connection. So Chris F, would you like to go first?
Sure. This is going to be quite the contrast. This is another poem that I think I've written in the last year or so, so it hasn't been anywhere. So I'm sure anyone else who's written will realize these moments are always the most terrifying moments. It's sort of the first time I've shared this more widely than anybody else, than just me and my family. It is a sort of an exploration of a moment in time in my life, where I sort of plucked up the courage to talk about my mental health and what happened. It's called I Mentioned That I Was Depressed. It was the windows that reminded me of a day long before, gentle stained glass. Little calming rays of amber and blue flicker on the wall above his head as he looses off his advice. Have you asked God for help? As if that might be some unexplored territory I missed. The devout teenager in me is incensed, quelled only by my older, calmer head. I need to hear him out, I think. Don't need to be pushing people away like this. There are more questions that last no longer than that afternoon. But I always remembered that he thought it was my fault. The wages of my sins, perhaps, a reckoning of sorts. I also seemed to understand that his advice made him sad as well, in the way that all earnest people of faith are when they pay more attention to the words than the human before them. The reason I did not mention the weight for another 10 years, why I hid it, trusted only really the sea and the sky with my heart, is in this room still, among the loose carpet tiles and the frosted glass, frustrated. I open a window to usher it away, not knowing whether it'll be waiting for me next time.
Wow. Oh, yes, Mum. Hi.
No, I just wanted to say thank you for sharing, Chris. It was a real honour to listen to that.
Yeah, lovely. So, Dad, have you got one to follow?
I've even lost what the theme was for a moment then. That was stunning, Chris. Thank you so much. So we're talking about connection, aren't we? So I've been on this journey towards trying to understand this idea of mysticism for quite a number of years. I think there are theologians here. I see Tim down at the bottom. He'd probably have a much better definition of what this might mean than me. But as far as I can understand, what my understanding of mysticism is it's reaching for something beyond. It's trying to kind of, within ordinary moments, be aware of the presence of something else, something beyond, something ethereal, something spiritual, which something that some people call God, of course, but all religious traditions have an idea of transcendence, and that is about mysticism. And some of them don't worry about calling it God. So, but the language, one of the common denominators that it seems to me is this idea of connection, the connectedness that sometimes we feel to all things. And we can't really always say why that is. I think transcendence is probably another way of describing it, that feeling of pregnancy within a thing or a moment or a relationship or standing before stars or whatever that might be. And my contention is that that is what poetry is for. That if I'm going to talk about what I'm trying to reach for in poetry at all, it's a mystical, transcendent other, whatever that might be. And I don't seek to define it very closely at all. But that's what this poem is about. It's called Human Races. The upright ape ascends from napped flint to silicon chip. He scratches sonnets in split slate and solves problems almost as fast as he makes them. His alchemy promised gold, but instead just turned the lights on, lighting a road ahead called progress. There is nothing new under the sun. The circle is still unbroken. Empires rise whilst others fall. Ours was not the first at all. It turns out that our times were never linear, just oscillation. And that for every page of knowledge gained, another is forgotten. But what are we, if not wisps of the same spirit? We carry in us the same amness as all things that ever were. Hidden under thin skin and hubris, it waits for those moments beneath stars or trees or tenderness when we remember. It is all about connection.
Wonderful. Okay, so the last connection poem, Vicky.
Thanks, Emily. This poem's called Mapping. I can't quite remember where it came from specifically, but it's sort of so for the last few years, I've been training to be a spiritual director with my lovely friend Debbie, who's here. Hello, Debbie. And part of that, I think, was part of the joy of that was just like hearing people's stories about their search for connection with the divine, however that might be termed. And I suppose it made me reflect on my own long pathway through life in that. Yes, so I can't really remember the specifics of how this poem itself came around, but I think that that's the sort of, it came from that trajectory, if you like. I learned there was a map leading to the heart of who you are, so I followed threads and trails, delicate spider silk, holloways, desire lines, currents and capillaries, every untouched way, each worn down path opened before me. The ease of it unanchored me, shook me. I chose a harder road, denied myself over and over and over. I chose starvation bray, fell down on the upward trudge to find you, picked gravel from proud wounds. A blackbird sang out laughter, so much agony and wreck. I wonder, have you considered the lilies?
Oh, fab.
I have a little mention, if that's all right. I didn't realize about the chat earlier. But
Right.
while we've been, you've been giving the poems on anger and then connection, and it made me think of somebody I came across 2 or 3 years ago at something I went to at Gladstone's library, first only time I've been there, wonderful place. And I met an Irish man called Padraig O'Tuama. And he gave a talk. I had no idea who he was. He gave a talk. It was wonderful. I talked to him, and then I got his book, and it was called In the Shelter. Yes, that's right. And I read it cover to cover, and you know, it was really very special, very wonderful, very spiritual. And right now, or certainly as of a couple of years ago, he had left his position as head of the Coromila, I think that's right, Coromila community in the north of Ireland, bringing people together, connecting, very difficult. And because he'd gone over to Glasgow to the university to do a PhD in creative practice as a poet, you see, in theology. And I'm stumbling through this because he's a wonderful person, but I haven't thought about him for quite a while. And you have to think, what do I remember about this wonderful person? But his book, In the Shelter, is really excellent and totally, I think, in line with what where you are leading us perhaps this evening there.
Thank you very much, Nicola. You're absolutely right. Many of us here, I think, will probably know Padraig's work from many years, in my case, of first coming across him in Greenbelt, and also a while ago we did this really clever thing where some kind of radio beam, put a localized radio signal, and different poems were encountered around the festival site, and some of those were Padraig's too. So yeah, thank you for the memory. I think we're going to take a short break now then, folks, and recharge our glasses. Emily, are you about to say something?